Betrayal. Let's think about that for a moment. It's different than disappointment. We're all going to disappoint each other from time to time. We're all going to find that we don't rise to the occasion or the expectation that someone may have of us. But betrayal is very different than that. Betrayal is you have a connection with someone that you believe is built on trust and fidelity and reliability. And that person takes that trust and uses it against you to intentionally harm you. Okay? What I see over and over again in my practice is one of the hardest processes, one of the longest processes for people is to get over betrayal, meaning someone that I loved, that I had a deep connection with, or an important relationship in my life set out to do me harm. Deliberate, calculated, right? So typically, we're going to see betrayal and betrayal trauma when my clients have been attached to partners or family members that are pretty toxic. Usually personality disordered, avoidant, narcissistic, whole host of different possibilities. But let's not get derailed by that. Let's focus on the fact that when that betrayal trauma happens, it's more than just the act of that person doing something to you deliberately to hurt you, deliberately to violate that trust. It is the act of robbing you of your reality. So let me think. So let's say you're in a relationship with someone. You've been in a marriage with them. Maybe you're in a marriage for like 20 years. And you believe that your partner is honest, loyal, hardworking, faithful. Okay? And your whole existence, this whole relationship has been built on a foundation that was a complete and utter lie, a complete and total fabrication. That person represented themselves in a way that was so disingenuous, and you bought it. You believed everything they said. And even when you may have questioned, like, something doesn't seem right, they calculatedly and systematically continue to invalidate you, your thoughts, your fears, your questions, your apprehensions about something. And that's gaslighting at its finest, right? You know deep down something's not right, and maybe you don't. But when you ask, there's an intentional desire to deceive you. So fast forward, you now learned that this 20-year marriage was built on lies. They were never faithful. They weren't really holding that job. They lied about the amount of money they had, or they lied about their family, or they lied. And now you're left to hold that space of the last 20 years. And what are you supposed to do with that? Because the first response is the anger, of course, toward the person who betrayed you, but then the anger at yourself, because it's almost like your own self-betrayal. You're angry that you didn't know. You're angry that you didn't pick up on the signs. And it's not a matter of whether you're smart or intelligent. It's a matter of your heart space. Most people who are betrayed are very trusting. Very trusting. They come from a good space. They're empathic. They're kind. And they can't imagine someone being intentionally cruel or misleading, especially about something as important as that fundamental building block of the relationship. And so by the time they come to therapy, their reality is so utterly destroyed and fractured that it becomes a process of rebuilding. The hardest part for them is rebuilding trust within themselves. And I can totally relate. I've been betrayed. And that betrayal robbed me of what I knew was one of my best qualities, my intuition, my discernment, my ability to really know and feel when something is off. But with that repeated and systematic abuse, because that's what it is, of making you question yourself, of making you question your own reality. By the time you're sitting in my office, you have been betrayed over and over and over again in that same relationship. So the toxicity of your partner has now robbed you of your safety, your emotional safety, and your reality. And that's where the work begins. What I have found, which is the fascinating other side of the equation, is that those relationships often present themselves to teach us something. And after you get past the initial pain, when you get past the anger, when you get past the disbelief, the negotiating, I mean, you go through all the stages of grief when you've been betrayed. And for those of you that don't know, let me do a quick recap. The stages of grief are, total disbelief, going to reject that as a reality. Then it's bargaining and negotiating. Well, maybe this was true, but that wasn't true. And is it really that bad? And then you go into anger or depression, and those can be intertwined, and you can vacillate back and forth between those, and then acceptance. But once you accept the reality, and it probably takes years, you've probably been in that relationship for years before you actually realized the degree of repeated and systematic betrayal. And once you do, it's like, I've invested all this time. I've invested not only in my partner, but their family and their other relationships. And to have to pull away from all of that is really challenging. And maybe you don't even have a choice. Like maybe you find out that person was cheating, or, they had a sex addiction, or they had another kind of addiction, alcohol, drugs, substances, whatever. And they have this whole secondary life over here. Maybe you discover that. What do you do with that? You want to deny it. Of course, you want to reject it. You want to push it away because the reality of that is just too painful. And if we accept the reality, that means we are accepting the pain, the betrayal, AKA deliberate infliction of pain. And so once we go through the process, first starting with the acceptance of this really happened. This person really did this to me. This person really is not who I thought they were. You grieve that. You grieve the relationship. You grieve the person that doesn't or didn't ever exist. And then you grieve the fact that I don't even know who this other person is. And then the focus becomes now, after grieving all of that, on you. Who am I now that betrayal has forced me to reframe my entire existence? Who am I now? And I think what I find most is that my clients, once they've accepted it, are willing to explore why maybe they gravitated toward that specific partner unknowingly. But there's something in the energy. There's something in the energy. There was something that pulled them. I want to help them. I want to save them. They sold you a story based on exactly what they knew you wanted to hear and experience. And you didn't know it. So you fell for it. So you grieve that, and then you go back to, what is the life I want to build now after the betrayal? And the best gift that you can give yourself is really becoming kind of hermetic, removing yourself from all people, places, and things temporarily, or maybe long-term, depending. And getting clear and intentional space with yourself. Sitting quietly, remembering the reality of that betrayal, remembering what was done, and not excusing it, not justifying it. And you're allowed to feel bad. You're allowed to feel bad for yourself. You're allowed to feel bad for your circumstance. You're just allowed to feel bad, sad, angry, whatever it is that's showing up. You're allowed to feel that. And then once you've done that, you get to come back clear-eyed, clear-headed, open new space to decide who you're going to become. And I can almost guarantee you that you're going to look back at that betrayal and say, that was the crumbling of a foundation and a version of myself that deserved more. That deserved more than people pleasing. That deserved more than breadcrumbs. That deserved more than being there to make everyone else okay. And in those moments, you find your true voice, you find your strength. The betrayals that have been done to me, looking back, and there were several, empowered me to really have a more honest and open relationship with myself and then with others. I became more conscious of who and what I selected, who I allowed in my energy, who was able to come into my vibration. Because I worked really, really, really fucking hard to get to a point where I'm here today talking to you and allowing myself to be open and vulnerable. And that's a lot to ask of someone, and I recognize that with my patients, for them to show up in their most raw and vulnerable space to a total stranger, they don't know me, and allow me to go inside that journey with them is beautiful. Part of why I started this podcast was those 20 plus years of sitting on the couch with my patients, the lessons learned, and they weren't always lessons that I taught them. Oftentimes it was the lessons they taught me in rising above, in power, in strength, in resistance, in, every possible facet of the human condition. But betrayal is one of the hardest because it robs you of everything you believe to be true. For example, I was in a relationship a while back, and I knew that the person was cheating. I knew that they were cheating. I knew it. And every time I'd ask, or every time I would try and, say something doesn't feel right, something feels off, I know something's going on, you're not leveling with me, you're not being honest, I got the same thing, like, oh, you have trust issues, like, why are you so distrustful? And I started really questioning myself, right? Like, why am I so distrustful? Because he was so convincing of telling me that I was projecting. He was really good at it, really good at selling that he was this wholesome, innocent party over here, and that I had trust issues. And so fast forward, a situation happened, and I needed his phone to call someone for him. And up pops all these communications with other women, and they were seedy. They were dark. I'm not going to get into it. They were dark, okay? And so when I approached him with it, it was turned on me for looking at his phone. Think about that. That is like the prime example of betrayal trauma. You've been betrayed and lied to and systematically abused. You discover the truth, and I wasn't looking for it. Later I would, by the way. Naughty me. If you ever have to check someone's phone, well, not a good thing. But innocently enough, I discovered this. And the focus is not on what happened, not the cheating, the lying, the systematic bullshit that I had to go through all that time. It was about me and who did I think I was to violate his privacy to check his phone. And so I ended up talking to his mom about it. And I was just so devastated. And, her response was, well, who do you think you are to check his phone? Like, I was calling you from his phone. I was returning your call. And she was like, well, I know who my son is. And I thought to myself, How do you sleep at night if you do? Right? But then that situation made me realize something, that that person who betrayed me, that was encouraged in the family of origin. Our value system was so completely different. So completely different. I'm all about at least aspiring. Do I do it perfectly? Fuck no. But aspiring to be the best version of myself, honest and transparent and available and present, right? I'm going to get it wrong. I'm going to get reactive. And when you've been betrayed over and over again, oh, your level of reactivity, let me take a moment here to acknowledge this part. Your level of reactivity, when you know that that person continuously lies to you and then you get angry, you become explosive, you become reactive, they take those moments. I wouldn't be surprised if they film me or other people or whatever. And then they're like, oh, she's crazy. Look at her. She's got anger issues. She's so, or he, right? When in reality, they're setting the stage from their repeated and systematic abuse. But then when you respond, you're the problem. When you inadvertently see the evidence, you're the problem. And his family of origin was all about like, we hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil. We just do the evil. And, as long as you don't talk about it, we're all good. And that didn't work for me. That didn't work for me. And what was harder was not only the betrayal of being cheated on and lied to for a huge period of time, that when I went to his mom, who was supposedly so loved me, and I was the best thing that ever happened to him, right? Her response was then another betrayal. Another betrayal. And when I told her, I couldn't believe that given our relationship over a good period of time, that she had no compassion for me, her response was, well, I guess you served your purpose. I guess I did. And that statement drove me into a whole new type of therapy for myself, and obviously bringing that now into my work with my clients for many years now. I guess I did serve my purpose. And ooh, did that hurt? That hurt. Because when I look back and I really evaluated the situation, it was all about being in service to her, her son, her family, her needs, her environment. And I remember when I hung up the phone, I remember saying to her, well, I guess I have. I've served my purpose. And I hope you really enjoyed saying that, because that'll be the last thing you ever say to me again. And it was. It was. Some people come from such a level of dysfunction that it's so culturally ingrained that, some families are so survival based. Some families are so entitled. Some people are so entitled that they don't even understand. They don't understand how their choices and decisions caused you real harm, caused you real damage. And so when I'm sitting across from a client, or I'm sitting across from you today, if you've been betrayed, like really betrayed, I'm sorry, because I know how deep that runs, and I know how hard it is to repair. And then I know how hard it is to then take that trust, or lack thereof, rebuild yourself, and then how do I not allow that in the next relationship? How do I not close off my heart, right? Do the work. You'll be okay. You'll be okay. What you will become is a stronger, more resilient person with boundaries, who listens to their intuition, who says, doesn't seem right. I don't care what they're saying. I know that something's wrong. And if you're not going to talk to me and partner with me in honesty, I can't be here, because it's not safe. Okay? Not safe, not safe, not safe, not safe. If it's not safe, you've got to go. And I don't care what kind of relationship it is, romantic, familial. Families are one of the hardest, right? You could be betrayed by a family member, but you're like, oh, well, they're still part of my family. I still have to be in it. Do you? Do you really? I don't know. I say anyone who's willing to actively betray you, knowing that their intention is to hurt you, to bring you down, to be superior in some way, to rob you of a choice. And this is where the betrayal gets really interesting, right? So in other words, if you knew that that person was betraying you, was cheating, lying, stealing, like whatever, they robbed you of your choice. Ding, ding, ding. Because they knew if you had fully understood and were aware of what was going on, you would have chosen differently and you would have left. That robbery is the betrayal. Every bit as much, if not more so, than the action they took against you. They robbed you of your choice. They robbed you of your safety. They robbed you of your trust in them, in yourself, and in people in the future. Because why would you trust someone else coming in if someone that you thought you knew and loved could hurt you so deeply? But you know what? You do the work, you heal, and you realize that that betrayal had nothing to do with you. And I'm sorry to say that, but it didn't. It had everything to do with them. Their brokenness, their sickness, their entitlement, their delusions, their addictions, their whatever it was that allowed them to think that this was okay. And if it wasn't you, it would have been someone else. And it probably is someone else. And when you step away from that relationship and they, still try and sell you that story and, I love you, and blah, blah, blah. When the next victim walks in, God, feel bad for them, but be also like, thank God, I got out of that. And once you get out of that and you spend some time in that cocoon, healing, grieving, like I said, no more telling stories and making excuses for what was done. It's grieving the real. It's grieving what really happened. Without the rose-colored glasses, without and they did it because they were wounded, or they did it because, no, just the cold, hard facts. I was betrayed. This person knew what they were doing. They did it anyway. They did it repeatedly. They didn't care about me. They didn't care about you. They didn't care about your feelings. They didn't care about the impact. They didn't care about your heart. They didn't care. And once you can digest that real reality, you're on ground one of rebuilding. But it's a really hard place to get to. It's a really hard place to get to. And so if you're on this healing journey, please get help. There are specialists in betrayal trauma. And when I started working with someone who really understood how that betrayal and that systematic and repeated abuse over years affected me and was able to speak that language, that was a game changer for me. And it certainly didn't hold me up from them moving on and having good relationships. If anything, it taught me to be more selective with who I bring into my energy and, who my partner is now, who I'm with, what makes me feel good, right? And knowing that I'm not going to listen to words, I'm going to listen to actions. I'm going to see how that person shows up. I'm going to see how I feel in my body. And if I'm feeling safe, that relationship is likely safe. And if I'm not, it's not. So as part of your homework, I want you to really think about not what goes on in here, right? The betrayal of what happens in our mind. It's like a maze that you can just keep going through, losing yourself, and one thought leads to another that leads to another, and oftentimes it's never seeking some kind of resolution or solution. It's just like self-betrayal. It's an illusion that you just keep living over and over and over again looking for an answer. And I'm telling you, when it comes to betrayal, there is no answer. they didn't care enough about you. They didn't value you enough. There's your answer. It sucks, but there's your answer. Okay? Now what? Do they continue to hold that power over you? Or do you take that power back and say, okay, I made a mistake. I was foolish. I didn't listen to my intuition. I can be upset with myself for that. I didn't set better boundaries. Okay, I could be upset with myself for that. Now I won't do that again. You can say, I'm never going to betray myself again for someone else. And if they say one thing and their actions do not align, they got to go. Because words are pretty. They're very pretty. Or they're very persuasive. But if their actions do not align, you have to wonder, what kind of mask are they wearing? Because actions will tell you everything about a person. How they show up. Do they show up? And when they do, when you really need them, is it about you or is it about them? That was the lesson I learned. It was like, that overpouring, that over giving to everyone and believing the best in everyone and wanting the best for everyone when I really needed that particular person from my past. They showed up, but it was still about them. It was still somehow about them. And I thought, no more. I am no longer serving my purpose other than right here and right now. This is my purpose, and I'm here to serve all of you by sharing my insights, my stories, and my experiences, personal and with clients. And the choice, my darling, has always been yours. Thanks for listening. Cat's on fire. Till next.